Welcome everybody to episode 11 of Stackability AI. I am your host, Austin Cornelio, joined by Mike Taylor, co-host of the show. How's it going today, Mike? Happy Thursday.
Yeah, happy Thursday. I keep saying the same thing, it seems like, on the intros. It's another crazy week in AI. I don't think there's that much technology-wise that's come out this week, but there are some more cultural and social things that we're going to be talking about today that I think are really, really fascinating. So I think it's going to be a good show.
Yeah, indeed. So with that being said, let's jump right in. Today we're going to talk about imposter syndrome. Most of the audience has probably heard the term at one point or time in their careers or lives, but we're going to specifically be talking about it in the context of generative AI today. So what is imposter syndrome? So basically, the definition is a condition of feeling anxious and not experiencing issues internally despite being high performing in external objective ways. So we're seeing a lot of this come up, I think, in today's day and age with generative AI and the boom. And just, I personally think that this is a product of intense race dynamics. So we came across a pretty interesting article that interviewed 1,000 business professionals. And there were some pretty interesting stats that came out of it. I'm going to read a few of them before we get into the actual meat and potatoes of the episode today. But it states that 26% of professionals surveyed say they have sometimes exaggerated their knowledge of AI or generative AI at work to keep up with superiors or colleagues. On the other side, 72% said they were familiar or very familiar with the term artificial intelligence, but this number dropped to 51% when they asked about the familiar with generative AI. So this one really stood out to me. I thought this was fascinating because, clearly people are trying to differentiate between AI and generative AI, and this really kind of stood out. Mike, what do you think about this?
Well, it's really interesting because the distinction is really what's really happening right now, right? The difference between AI as we've kind of imagined it through sci-fi and the stuff that we've done with maybe Alexa, if you thought of that as AI, or these other tools that have been around for a while, that for some reason was never really labeled AI. That was not part of the group. So you would hear the word artificial intelligence, but you really wouldn't know what it is. But now with like ChatGPT, Bard, and all the others that are coming out, these are generative AI, which is what people are unfamiliar with. So I think that, part of the reason why we're doing this podcast is to try and familiarize people with that part of what's happening in the world. And I think that most people are unaware or uninterested or scared. And the conversation with this whole thing started becoming obvious to me was when I was talking to some friends in different types of businesses, and I'd ask, are you using AI for any of this stuff? And they would kind of either say no, or I don't want to use AI. I want to be authentic, or feel like they were cheating if they were using AI. So it got me thinking like, wow, I wonder what that feeling is. So you start like exploring how that feels. And even another person I met last week and was talking to him about it, when he mentioned that, I said, are you using AI for that stuff? Or are you using any of the chatbots or anything? And he kind of looked down at his feet and smiled and was like, yeah, I'm doing it. There's that feeling that you're cheating. And it's funny because it seems that creative people feel like they're cheating when they use a tool, but nobody ever thinks like the musician is using a reverb or a whammy bar or something, some other tool on their instrument, that it's cheating. But it's interesting when you get into the creative space, when you're using artificial intelligence, people feel like they're cheating or something. So what do you think of that?
That's a fantastic point. I would say this. I 100% agree. I think it's very important to be like, hey, I'm cheating, or hey, I am actually using this to solve a problem, to be more productive, to do whatever with my business, or to do whatever with myself. Because I do. So I'm a musician. I'm an artist. I value pure human creativity. And I am kind of from the camp where if you tell an AI to go make this piece of artwork or some music, like I do think that that's cheating in a lot of ways. Like, sure, you can put your spin on it. Like, you can always make it original depending upon how you like rope it into your workflow or whatever. But at the end of the day, like the machine is doing a very heavy amount of the creative work. So I think that that is, in my opinion, kind of like a separate thing. And I think that we need to identify between like that and really what is imposter syndrome. But I can see how they blend together.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
It's
That's kind of like my 2 cents on that.
yeah, no, I think it's an interesting thing that, this is all new stuff, and this is going to apply itself in all these different ways. When the wall of sound was created, and when all of these synthesizers and things happened in the 80s, and all of a sudden you had drum machines and things like that, people felt the same anxiety, I think, about wanting to be authentic. And what does authentic mean? What does creativity mean? And I've been reading this book by Rick Rubin, and I'm actually going through it again for a second time, because he talks about like what the creative process is and what the creative spark is, and that sometimes we overthink it, and if we're making things for an audience or making things for somebody other than ourselves, then it isn't inauthentic, and it is something that will not probably do very well. But when we create things with whatever tools we're using, and when we create things that are authentically inspired and for our own pleasure, for our own enjoyment, then that will generally resonate with the larger audience. So I think, we're going to go through a transition where creative people are going to feel like you are cheating because you're using an advanced tool to help. But, as we've talked about, I think a person plus AI is better than a person without AI or AI on its own. So it's a tool. And if you're not, taking advantage of how it can help, then you're probably missing out. And somebody who has your level of creativity plus a tool is going to be better off than somebody with just your level of creativity. So it'll be interesting, because I mean, right now, like I said, we're going through a transition. Technology is always challenging us to stay current in a way that we probably haven't had to in our entire evolution, over the last 30 years, man. Wow. 20 years,
Yeah.
it's been a ride.
It's very true. I'd like to highlight the staying current point, because I think that's where a lot of this comes from. So the next thing I want to talk about were like the problems, like what causes this sort of psychological trigger, right? And I think part of it is the anxiety of just living in today's world with so much going on and so many inputs. And now you add this on top of it. Say that you are somebody that works in an adjacent field or in the field, and maybe you weren't directly part of AI, but now everybody is shoving this stuff down your throat, and like it's clearly time to adapt. How do you do that? So I think that that's where part of this feeling comes from, because you can grasp a lot of these skills like relatively easy, and you can get to a point where you can have the conversation. You can have a pretty good conversation, and wherever you go with it after that is kind of like your own thing, right? But then there's obviously going to be different levels of experience. You might be talking to somebody that has, a legitimate decade of experience in LLMs or something, but that's a good thing, because you can learn from that person. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is I kind of feel that this quote unquote imposter syndrome feeling is really just a product of learning something new, right? It's kind of inevitable in a lot of ways, because you kind of have to feel this way. I've been feeling this way my entire career, because I went to school for design, and I quickly pivoted into software engineering, and a lot of this stuff that I learned on my own. So I'm self-taught in a lot of ways. So I've always been kind of feeling, at certain points, not always, hey, like if I had more formal training on this, what would the outcome be? Would I be at a different spot? Would I be at a better spot? And I've had plenty of people that I work with on various teams who have, really notable computer science degrees and everything. And I consider us equal in a lot of ways. So you kind of just have to get out of your head and, say, screw it. I think that one of the most amazing things about the time that we live in right now is it's so easy to go and acquire knowledge. But I think the important part is like finding the correct learning material that works for you and sticking with it and figuring out a way to progress as far as you can and have fun while doing it. Because you have to be inspired, right?
Yeah.
It's like if it becomes like a job and it feels like unpleasant, then it's going to be a whole nother problem that you're going to be facing, right?
Yeah, and I like what you said, and you know, this is probably at the core of where the imposter syndrome, regardless of in any subject, comes about. And it's, you know, whether or not you're a scientist or whether or not you're somebody who has a degree versus not a degree, and that's something that we've created over the last half century of our existence, where, oh, well, you have a bachelor's degree or you have a master's degree, or, oh, well, you only have a certificate in that, you know, or you only have, you know, something like this idea that there's some sort of class or caste system based on your degrees. You know, you hear it a lot in the science fields, especially, you know, when you start looking into, you know, like Graham Norton and these people who are doing this research on ancient history, and they're finding these things that the archaeologists scoff at, but they can't explain, but they don't like his explanation, you know, so then is he an imposter because he's discovering these things? That's probably, I'm sure at some point he probably have felt that way, like, oh, well, these guys have degrees and I don't, so therefore I'm not qualified to speak on a subject. And I think that's where we've gotten into this place in society where there's this dogma about things that isn't necessarily true, but we've kind of convinced ourselves that the only qualified voice is a voice that has X, Y, and Z. And this is something that's happening really quickly with AI because it popped onto the scene like all of a sudden for everybody. All of a sudden you had a chatbot that you could ask questions to and do things and find out things and get summaries of articles and have things written for you in somebody else's voice, and all of these things that are happening. And I know, you know, you and I spend a lot of time in this space and, you know, researching these things to do the podcast or just because we're interested in it. And it's still overwhelming when we're trying to do it. So I can't imagine if you're kind of sitting on the sidelines and just kind of, you know, fake it till you make it kind of a mentality, or, you know, you're the kid who's reading the Cliff's Notes in the school and hoping you didn't get called on. That's going to be, it's going to be intimidating. One of the good things I saw in that article, Austin, that we were referencing, and we could definitely put this link in the description, but 85% of professionals have at least some level of interest in improving their AI and generative AI knowledge. So for something that, like I said, just popped, I was encouraged by that number, that there is a high level of interest in learning about this, because, you know, I haven't seen it in any of the people I know and none of my family members.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I think that's a fantastic thing to bring up. My take on this is as follows. I think that the people that you see responding to this in the way that you just mentioned are basically people that want to capitalize off of the opportunity. So these are people that are probably on LinkedIn all the time, social media, you know, definitely business type folks here, either someone that is, you know, has been hooked into probably someone posting some crap on LinkedIn about top 10 GPT prompts for XYZ, right? And then you look at the post and there's like 1,000 comments. But then if you look at that and you really engineer what's happening here, the person is being like, hey, I'll give you this thing that I basically used ChatGPT to generate and maybe ran it through Canva to make it look halfway decent. And if you like me, then I'll give you the content, right? Which I think is ridiculous.
That's
right?
the Instagram business model, you know. It's like,
exactly. So, but if you're not like really diving into that, you could be like, wow, like this person clearly they're probably have very little experience. They're probably only been in the game for a few years. Some are definitely like pros. You know, I see like legit marketing firms, people with reputable businesses posting this stuff. But the point I'm trying to make is it's you look at that, and even if you spend a little bit of time thinking critically about it, you could be like, well, that's success right there. Like there's 600 comments and I'm a rational human being and I'm looking at the post and I can tell that it's really not that good. Like the aesthetics are low, like there's no good formatting on the graphics that they're using. I mean, it just completely looks like it was done in like two seconds and just like spewed out by some automated system, but yet it's getting like all of this traction. That could make you feel pretty anxious because maybe you're of the mindset like, hey, I really want to build something with quality, and it takes a lot of time to think about it and figure out my unique selling point and all of that. But now I'm like, well, I need to keep up and I need to go, and it's a journey, right? Like it's got to. I don't think, even though a lot of this technology has empowered people to do things very quickly, I would be careful with that because I think it's just going to work against you. Because I think that there's a really good opportunity here to do, again, the opposite of like what everybody else is trying to do with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Some of those people will prevail for sure. But like, you can't take 100 people and say, okay, I'll go do basically the same thing. Like only a fraction of those guys are going to like stand out. So like, why not just pick something different and like make it easy on yourself? And then you're going to have a good, satisfying win. Like the positive affirmation that comes out of that is going to be huge because you're doing something new. You've thought critically. You've looked at your competition. You've looked at what everybody is doing. You've learned by picking out the good ones. Like, hey, this guy's doing something awesome. I'm going to find inspiration from this guy. This one over here. Cool. Great. So I think that's one way that I like to break out of this feeling, because when you see somebody doing something and you know that they're doing it with minimal effort and they're getting like decent returns, it's like,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
No,
it fuels the whole problem here.
Well, I think you did a great job of summarizing the way that I feel about this stuff, because, if you've been on the internet, forget about AI, everybody's always, there's affiliate marketing and this marketing and that marketing and this, buy my course and do this stuff. And I've made $7 billion and now I'm going to teach you how to do it. All you have to do is give me $9.95 and you could have my link. It's just these things where none of them feel natural. None of them feel good when you're looking at them. You might be thinking, okay, I'm going to do this get rich quick scheme. And then they're not explaining that they have, the reason why they're successful is because they have 150,000 followers on 7 channels, and you have your 500 friends who already know who you've probably told that you're going to try and sell them something. It's not just some cookie cutter thing. And AI has only made those imposters a little bit easier to spot, because you could see the number of things. And like you said, with that article or any of the articles you see, you can pick out pretty quickly whether or not a person's really interested in this subject or they're just having it created by AI. And I have a friend who's starting a faceless YouTube channel about gardening. And it's interesting because, the topic is pretty, it's like apartment gardening. So it's a unique, it's kind of a niche idea. And, he's already got a couple of people who are interested in it. And the key thing is that he's interested in it, right? So he takes his idea, he plops it into one of the LLMs, comes up with a schedule of stories, ideas for stories. He puts together a bunch of videos and stuff, and he's starting it off as faceless, so he's not in him, but he's learning about a subject that he's interested in. He's learning about putting together these videos. He's learning about how to do voiceovers and how to have these voiceovers tweaked and using the tools available to him. And ultimately, he's interested in the subject matter. So he's not going to burn out on something that he's not really interested in, that he's only doing for the sake of doing something that he thinks is going to be some get rich quick scheme. He's actually trying to learn and using the tools to help him learn, but also, and this kind of comes back to the Rick Rubin thing, right? If you're doing something for yourself in the creative way, then it'll probably resonate. Whereas if you're into knitting, you can use AI as a tool to come up with ideas for subject matter and then start doing a knitting online course or a knitting something, but if you don't have that passion and interest, then you're never going to get to the audience you're trying to get to in any field. But I think that people are deluded into thinking that oh wow, look at this outline that AI created, let me have an AI person read it, and but that's just not going to resonate. It's not going to resonate. Like you said, Austin, the few people who do have some success get you like, oh man, like I could do that.
Well, you made some fantastic points there. You're already seeing this sort of play out in some ways where certain, I think it was Instacart had AI generated food images somewhere within their app flow. And if for those of you who have done anything with prompting image LLMs, you know that if you need to get something out of it that is correct consistently, it's not easy, and you really have to craft really good prompts. So that aside, what was happening was the images that were getting put into like the Instacart feed around like suggested recipes or whatever, like they had hallucinations all over them, and they ended up rolling the feature back because it just wasn't a good look, right? And it was clear that this probably wasn't good to put in front of your users. So I think it's a good example of not jumping, like being smart about it. Like they took a chance, they didn't have their prompts correct or whatever. Maybe they're using the wrong kind of image model, but regardless, it wasn't a good move. And like when that sort of thing happens, it's going to hurt the generative AI movement, I think. Probably not by that much, but still, like people, like Business Insider is going to write about that. Someone's going to write about that, and it's going to be read by some people for sure.
Certainly when you're a brand like that, you have, especially when you're a food brand, you're associated with food, and then you start throwing up these AI pictures that don't look anything like it. I mean, we've played around with the AI food generation stuff, and I mean, some of them looked fantastic, and then other ones it's just like a whole fish, in the middle of a casserole and things like that. If you're not really specific on what you're looking for, but that's the risk you're taking when you're doing stuff like that. Especially when you're like a big brand, now if you're building things and learning, it's all good. But if you're these larger companies that have a lot to lose in terms of.
Well, yes. And this is where you have to be careful as a big brand, because say big brand is just trying, and this is like probably one of the main problems I have with this whole movement is that like, the race dynamic again that is being put on everything is just it's just such bullshit. And I think it's like I'll just go out and blame like the likes of like OpenAI for doing this, because it's part of their whole go to market strategy is to like promote this kind of behavior, right? Like it's really good technology, don't get me wrong, like it's fundamental in a lot of ways. But what we have right now is only going to last for so long. It's only going to be interesting for so long. And I would even go out and say right now that it's starting to become uninteresting because of some of these things that are happening. Everybody and their mother is trying to capitalize on it. We already talked about that for a good amount of time during this episode. B, like you're starting, because of that, like, again, people are engaging in racing across so many different parallels because of it, because, of competition and being first to market and everything. Like now we're seeing problems like this arise, and these are just like, granted they're small, like they're not hurting anybody, but they could take something that could be really great, and because of the way that it's getting released without like a lot of testing and not a lot of validation, like you could have problems with it. So it's crazy, but I digress.
No, you made a really good point there in terms of the race. And, and I would argue that it has done damage and will continue to do damage, because people, something like we were talking about with imposter syndrome, when you're working for a company and you're not necessarily independent in your own way. You have to rely on that company to do things, and you've gone to school and you know how to write and you know how to do these tasks that you've been assigned. Not only do you have like this anxiety of, hey, this could possibly cost me my job at some point, because what value am I adding beyond my ability to walk into an office and do some few things. And so now you think, okay, wow, AI, they keep writing these articles, how many jobs it's taking. Google laid off 12,000, then is planning to lay off another 25,000. It's like, that's stressful. And then then you go, maybe you start looking around and you start looking for a job, and the process of getting an application in and getting a job, going on an interview, and now you're forced to level up your knowledge of AI because it might come up in an interview, so.
Well, that makes it even worse.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're making my point. Like that's even a whole nother level of race dynamics that's happening, because now that if you work for a FANG company, every single one of them has had mass layoffs. So like that's in the back of your head all the time, right? So if you weren't being proactive about learning AI, now you have to be even more on it and really carving out a schedule that works and working on learning whatever it is pretty much every day until you come to a point where you've achieved your goals. And then you have to, maybe start to interview. So on top of it, you probably have a family, like you have responsibilities. It's a lot for like one person to really have to deal with. So again, that feeds into the whole insecurity of things and feeling like you're an imposter, because like it's not all going to be wins. Like to learn anything and to learn anything well, you have to spend time at it, and you have to fail, and you have to experiment, and it's like an iterative process. So
yeah. And I think that anxiety level for a group of people, if you look at the millennials and Gen Z coming up, who are already riddled with anxiety about most things, this I could see it being very challenging to have to deal with all of the change that's coming, the speculative change that's presumed, I would say, and then learn something new on top of that. So now do your job, worry about your job, try and find a new job, learn new skills. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. So, but you can do it. So I'd say all of those things being said, you might be asking yourself like, okay, fine. Like now what can I possibly do? So I would say it depends on what bucket of person you are. If you're somebody that wants to build something with AI, I would say first thing you should do is you should get a ChatGPT Plus account or sign up for Google Bard, Anthropic. Pick like whomever, or try them all, honestly. Just don't try one, try all of them. That's what you should definitely do. And you should get a feel for really like prompting these things so many different ways. People talk about prompt engineering. There's a million different pieces of content you can find about writing good prompt, but essentially you want to be very explicit and you want to tell the thing how to act. You want to give it context, and you want to be like, this is what I want out of it. Act like this sort of thing, this sort of person, and give me this, and then work through it until you're like, wow, this thing really helped me. I think that would be just the way to just scratch the surface, because you need to start there, because whatever you're doing with generative AI is going to be because you want to get something out of it. Either it's text, either it's image, either it's audio, right? Like the output is just a different modality. So once you feel good with that, I would make my own GPT via the OpenAI App Store. And this is kind of like the next level, because it gives you more of a look into like the inner workings of the LLM, right? And it'll legitimately build you your own GPT that other people can query and use to get specific knowledge from, right? So say that say that you're like a certain kind of lawyer, maybe that focuses on criminal justice in inner cities, and you want to build an LLM around your knowledge, right? So you go into the App Store, you'd start a new GPT. It's going to ask you, like, it's really good at asking qualifying questions like, hey, what do you want to make, right? And you'll say, hey, I'm a criminal lawyer. I work in Brooklyn. I'm 28 years old or whatever. And I want to build a GPT that surfaces some of my expertise domain knowledge in inner city criminal law. So from there, I mean, the thing will make you your own logo for the GPT. It'll ask you all of this stuff, like I said, and it's really good at helping you refine it. So it'll put your brain into that kind of spot that it needs to be to ask these questions by default. So I think that's pretty cool. From there, I guess it really depends on if you want to get more technical and actually start to build stuff. Then you can take any of these courses from Google, Udemy. There's tons of relatively cheap or free courses online that you can take that I would definitely suggest, and I'll put some of the links in the description of the episode here. You just start your journey there, and then you'll learn like the technical skills. From there you could really do anything. You could get into the strategy aspect of it. You could provide strategy sessions and services to small businesses. You could build AI powered apps, which are really fun. You can take all of this power of these LLMs and you can integrate them into your own user experience, your own app, and really the sky's the limit. I think that that's personally really cool. That's what I do. And I think like the more I think about it, the more I just come up with awesome ideas where you can augment a specific business with AI, generative AI functionality. It really becomes a cool user experience. So, if you spend 6 months doing that, starting from zero and saying, I'm going to build all of this stuff, I mean, you're definitely going to you're definitely going to learn. There's no way you're not going to learn valuable things from that.
Yeah. And I think that would be your work becomes your portfolio, and the experience that you have when you do go on an interview and somebody asks you about AP, do you know anything about AI? And you could say, yeah, actually I've built, 6 GPTs from the GPT store that solve this and this problem. I have a friend who I met in Mexico, and she's an author and went in, and I would not think of her as a technical person in any way, shape, or form, but she created her own GPT to come up with prompts for books. So if you take what we've been talking about and you apply it to something that you're interested in, and then go ahead and build something around it, or if you say have a particularly tedious job that you do, where you're dealing with large spreadsheets, or you're dealing with stuff that is just tedious and boring, then you can build a GPT to solve the problem for you. I have one where it's like I wanted to do something in Excel. I have a giant list of people and another giant list of people. I wanted to look it up and add a field and do that stuff. And I'm playing around with the prompt. I can't quite get it right, but it's the work I'm putting in is going to solve this problem forever for me.
For sure. And on to the next problem. So, I mean, that's a fantastic example that you shared. So good stuff.
But don't fret. This is why stackability is why we named it this. It's because you're skill stacking. You don't have to learn it all in one fell swoop. You're going to add little bits here and there, and become conversational around it. Because if you are in a position where somebody's going to ask you something, if you've gone ahead and built a GPT, then you're already ahead of them. So it doesn't even matter. They're going to say, what did you do? You say, I built a GPT this weekend that does this. And they're going to be confused. And if they're the one doing the interviewing, they'll probably look at you like you're some kind of a genius, because they're not even going to understand how easy it really is to do.
Yeah. The whole point is to make yourself smart so you can help to make other people feel smart. If you can do that, I think that you can do anything, especially now, in the opportunity. And I also do think that this is a short window here. I think that early adoption, and I still do think that if you get into it now, I would consider it early. If you look at the whole population of even the United States, make it easy, the people that are really thinking about this, there's not that many. So definitely seize the opportunity and build stuff, learn stuff, ask questions. I'll share a pretty interesting story before we wrap. When I first started in on this, the format was actually Medium, and I was doing a bunch of Medium writing on AI, and I was posting it to my LinkedIn. I don't have like super honed in internet marketing skills. So I was legitimately just writing articles on Medium about interesting AI topics. This was about like a year or so ago. And I was just like overwhelmed on like the people that were reaching out to me asking, hey, this, that, and the other thing. But one of the coolest things that came out of it is I was able to secure an advisory board with one of the reputable colleges here in New York City for one of their AI programs. And I just thought that was amazing that I was even able to do that off of really minimal promotion and writing and such. So maybe I got lucky, who knows? But, it was very validating. And because of that led one thing to another. Right. And that's one of the reasons why we have this podcast today is because of experiences like that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because the opportunities that exist, you have no idea about. We have no concept of who's listening, who's watching, who wants this kind of information. And when you put it out there, if you build it, they will come. That's the old adage, but it's true. You don't know who's watching, who's reading, especially now. If you have some skills or want to learn some skills, this is a great opportunity to be at the leading edge of something that's going to be transformative. And probably in the next couple of years, it's going to be so integrated that you're not even going to have an opportunity to play around like this. You're not even going to have an opportunity to build your own GPT, because every GPT that would ever be built has already been done, and it'll be fully integrated into your application, and you won't have the same kind of hands-on experience that you can get right now.
Yeah, very well said. That's happening right now. Google is for sure working on integrating this into as many offerings as possible. And then they're not even being, closed about that. Like it's very much in the open. So Bing is a perfect example of that. The whole thing that happened with really the inception of this whole movement here was because Microsoft partnered with OpenAI and started integrating all of their OpenAI LLM functionality into Bing, and that was it.
Yeah, no, that was when Microsoft Edge started doing the video summaries. I started right away. Like, that was the first time I had downloaded a Microsoft Internet product in 20 years, 15 years. I hadn't used Internet Explorer or any kind of, I didn't even know what Edge was. I thought it was some, coding platform, and it was the browser, and it had that. And then today I just saw a headline that says that Edge is beating out Chrome in terms of users and downloads and everything. So Microsoft really just roared back into the tech game with this AI open AI partnership and integrating these tools, which we could do a whole episode on some of the concerns we have with the search engines and using this AI to summarize everything for you, so you don't get to see the underlying content itself. But for another day.
Yeah, indeed, for another day. So there we have it, folks. At the end of the day, we're all imposters one way or another. The key is at what point you take your imposter syndrome to the next level and actually do something to make a business, to harvest knowledge, whatever it is that you're after. So don't feel bad about it. Keep jamming. There's tremendous opportunities here, and nothing is going to change my view on that. So
create a GPT. You're no longer an imposter.
Right. It's all you got to do. So that wraps up episode 11. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Hope you guys found it insightful and inspirational. Feel free to like us, subscribe to the podcast.
Share it with your friends.
Yeah. All, your family. My mom loves the podcast.
Yeah, we got a real market in the boomer generation.
Exactly. Boomers are the future. Who would have thought?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. Bye.